would now like to introduce our keynote speaker, TJ Noel-Sullivan, who is the founder and producer at the Hartford Film Company and the 2026 SBA Connecticut Young Entrepreneur of the Year. Please welcome TJ.
All right. Hello, everyone. As she said, my name is TJ Noel-Sullivan. I am the founder of the Hartford Film Company. I'm also a Hartford native, a proud graduate of the Hartford Public Schools. And I'm really honored to be invited to be here today to speak with you all. The story of the Hartford Film Company started 4 years ago. 4 years ago, in May of 2022, I was working at Mattel Films on really cool projects like Barbie. And when I was working at Mattel, it was a great place to work. I learned a lot. But one of the things that I learned is how impactful storytelling and films can be. And so at Mattel, my job was to use stories to sell more toys. But I also just saw how the entire industry shaped how we as a society view things. So if we go down to the local middle school down the street and you ask them what they know about Los Angeles, most of them have probably never been to Los Angeles, but they all have these ideas of what Los Angeles is because they've seen it in movies. And so as a proud Hartford native, I saw this opportunity to come back to Connecticut, to come back to Hartford and tell stories here. And I also saw this opportunity because I knew the ecosystem that I was coming into, and I knew Hartford and Connecticut was an underserved market when it came to film and video production companies. So many of the commercials that you see that are filmed locally are actually filmed by out-of-state companies that come in from New York or Boston. And so we saw this opportunity to come back. And so 4 years ago, I moved back to Hartford. I started the Hartford Film Company. And our first project was a movie called Midas. And if you have seen Midas, you might be a little surprised that I'm standing up here. I also was surprised when I got the invite. Because Midas follows 3 recent graduates that set out to rob a health insurance company. So when Access Health Connecticut invited me to come be the keynote speaker, I thought it was maybe like a cool gotcha prank or something. But Midas was a film. It was filmed entirely in Hartford. It got 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It opened in theaters all across the country, and in Hartford, we broke actually the local box office record for the highest grossing film post-COVID. We beat Barbie, which was a really fun little fact for me. And then we were acquired by Starz, where we opened up as the #1 movie nationwide that week. And so there's a lot of lessons that I learned from making Midas. But the 2 most important ones that stuck with me are, number 1, sometimes you have to build it yourself. So I kind of lied to you a second ago when I said I saw this really great opportunity. Because the truth is, I had no interest in starting a small business. And I actually called every other production company in Connecticut first and said, hey, I have this movie. I have the financing to make it. Can we do it through your small business? And was told, oh, sorry, we just make Hallmark movies, or we only really do kind of corporate commercial things. And so Hartford Film Company exists really because I knew what I wanted. I wanted a Hartford Film Company, and it didn't exist, and so I had to go out and make it myself. And I know that for so many of the small business owners in this room, that is why your small business exists, because you saw something that you wanted to exist in your community, and you had to be the one that went out and did it. The other thing I learned is that community is your biggest asset, and I see this over and over and over again. First, for us, as we were making Midas, there were so many things that if I had made this film in LA, would have cost us thousands of dollars. We needed to film in a food truck park. I went to the local food truck park down the street and said, hey, we'd love to shoot a movie here, and we'll shout you out in the credits. And they said, we'd love to have you. When do you want to come? We put out a word. We were looking for extras. We had hundreds of people show up to the Bushnell for our big extra scene. And so that kind of stuff I think you only find in Connecticut, especially on the film side. If I had tried to make this movie in New York or LA, everybody would have said, yeah, we've heard this 100 times. But here there was this community support that really made Midas possible. The other thing was when we actually went to go release the film, I was truly blown away by the local press coverage that we got. It was fantastic, and I mentioned that we broke some box office records. It is because of the local press coverage. Like the first night, it was all my friends and family was at the theater, and then a week later, it was people that said, oh, I saw the WNPR article, or I saw you on the local news, and I wanted to come and support. But so that was one of my huge takeaways, was that sometimes you have to believe in your community and ask your community to come out and support you in order to grow. But so I finished Midas. I was so proud. It's a passion project, right? To make a movie like that, it's this huge investment of your time, and you're pouring everything into it, and it was successful. And then I was like, oh boy, now what? Because I have this Hartford Film Company, but really we've only done one thing, and that one thing is now over. So how do I turn this project into a small business? And there was a ton of things that I needed to learn. And so I actually got lucky. The Small Business Development Center, there was an email that went out to everybody that had an LLC that said, hey, there's this free resource. And I actually took the time to click on it and say, hey, I'd love to take advantage of it. And I remember I had my first meeting with a woman named Michelle, who's fantastic, although I shouldn't say her name because I shout her out too much, and now it's going to be hard to book time with her. But Michelle, I met with her, and she said, you need to build budget projections. And I was like, this is the film industry. I don't know how you build budget projections. She said, trust me, you need to sit down and really think about this as a business, and how are you going to project out your budget? How are you going to find when the right time is to grow? And so starting with those budget projections, I was able to determine, okay, now I'm ready to actually hire full-time employees. How do I go about doing that? Again, Michelle sat me down and said, here's the checklist of the things that you need to do in order to hire your first employee. And then actually I want to shout out Franco. Recently, as we've continued to grow, we're at a point where we need to offer health insurance to our employees. And I also, again, I'm a filmmaker. I think of myself as a filmmaker first, and I have to be a small business owner in order to be a filmmaker. And so learning how to offer health insurance was not high on my list of things I wanted to do. But I kept hearing about this ICHRA thing, and I Googled it and didn't find it because ICHRA is not spelled how I thought it was spelled. But I finally got there, and I clicked on the first two options, and I price shopped around. And then, right before I pulled the trigger, I had a contract in front of me from an outside supplier. Right before I pulled the trigger, I heard about the Access Health business portal. And I called up, and I actually got Franco. It's a true story. And Franco, he explained to me why we should do it through Access Health. And I was like, okay, well, what's the catch? Where are the hidden fees? Because in the two private providers that I had talked to, I went through all this great stuff, and then at the end they're like, oh yeah, and then there's a $5,000 annual fee at the end, and don't worry about that. And so I asked Franco, is there a hidden fee? Nope, there's not a hidden fee. And so we now are some of the, first businesses to be using Access Health Business. It's been fantastic. I really cannot recommend it enough. And I will say, they did not know that we were customers when they invited me to speak either. So I'm still confused why they invited me to speak, but it was not because they knew I was going to shout them out like that. One of the other big lessons we learned in this process is that hiring matters. So when I talked to Michelle and was ready to hire my first employee and put it out there, put it on all the different job boards and things, I got a bunch of applications in. And what I was finding was that the applicants that we were getting weren't really what we were looking for, right? There were a bunch of people that were like, it would be really cool to work in film, but they hadn't gone and actually studied it. They didn't have experience in it. And I was scratching my head because I was like, Connecticut isn't the biggest state, but we have a good pool of people. There should be people who have gone and gotten a degree in film or pursuing it professionally. Where are all of them? And then I realized they were in a similar position to what I had done. They graduated from college with a degree in film, and they went to Los Angeles or New York because their professors and everybody, the movies that they watched, everything told them that if you want to work in film, that's where you have to go. And so we, I think a lot of different industries in Connecticut that aren't known for being in Connecticut, we had to say, how are we going to break that mold? How are we going to bring in the employees that we want to attract? And so we did it in a couple ways. First, we partnered with a local nonprofit, Real Art Waste, to start a high school apprenticeship program. Each summer we have 15 paid apprentices, high school students who come and learn filmmaking from us. And part of the idea is just planting that seed in their head that, hey, there's filmmaking happening in this area. And then what we found is that our most effective way has been our college internship program. Because I was right, there are a lot of really talented people from the area who are going and studying at some of the top film schools in the country. University of Southern California, NYU, Emerson. These are all really fantastic film schools, and they have a ton of Connecticut locals who are studying there. But just like me, they were being told, you got to move to New York or LA. And so our internship program, I call myself like an NBA talent scout. I try and go find the most talented college kids and say, hey, come spend a summer with us. We pair them with a local nonprofit. They do a pro bono video for that nonprofit, and they understand what it's like to work in film here in Connecticut. And we've had a really good success rate of bringing those college students back to work for us after they graduate. And so it was thinking through things differently. I was kind of assuming, hey, we're just going to post the job listing and we'll be able to fill it really easily. One of the things that I've learned is that we actually had to do that work to develop the really strong talent. And then the last lesson I learned is something that really scared me. So I am young enough, there's a word in my generation that I think to older generations is not such a bad word, but it's a 4-letter word that begins with D that for my generation is really scary. And that word is debt. Debt, when I'm from a generation that we're told student loan debt, super scary, credit card debt, super scary. Everything we were told is that debt is this bad thing that you should avoid at all costs. And I think this was one of the biggest obstacles for us as we grew. For the first 3 years of Hartford Film Company, I was totally opposed to debt. We took on no debt, and my whole mindset was we're going to make money on a project, we're going to squirrel a little bit of that away to invest in something, but we're never going to go into debt to make the next step. We're going to just slowly but surely build, because the idea of debt and the possibility of going bankrupt was so scary to me. And it was Michelle, my incredible business advisor, who a year ago sat me down and said, listen, TJ, you're talking about the growth that you want to do. It's just going to take twice or 3 times as long if you're so focused on doing it in this way. Debt can actually be a really good thing. And so we applied for the Small Business Boost Fund, which I think has been mentioned already today, because we needed to buy a Sprinter van. Our equipment, which you can see in that photo there, I was trying to stuff all that equipment into the trunk of my SUV every time. And not only was it a pain, but also we would show up to set and be like, okay, give us 30 minutes to set everything up and take everything out of my car. And so we knew we needed a Sprinter van, and through the Small Business Boost Fund, we were able to buy a used Ford Transit with the liftgate, and now we look so professional. We show up, the carts come out, we're ready to go in about 3 minutes. And so that was a huge step forward for us. And that happened a year ago. We bought the van in June 2025. In less than a year, the additional billables that we've had from both the van and the additional equipment that we're able to bring has surpassed the cost of the van. And so the lesson there for me was sometimes you have to take that risk, and it will pay off very quickly if you're making the right risk. So Hartford Film Company has continued to grow. We are now a full-service production company. We do feature-length films. Midas was the first one. We have a feature-length documentary about the nationwide teacher shortage that wraps up at the end of the school year. We also do a ton of commercials. I'm going to share a couple examples in a second, but we work with small businesses, nonprofits, state agencies, and we also do mini docs. So as I'm going to discuss, I think storytelling really is the future of where this industry is going, and it's something that we take a lot of pride in. As I'm hiring, the key fact for me is, are you a strong storyteller? I can teach you how to use a camera. I can teach you how to set up a light. Do you have that natural storytelling instinct? So storytelling, some of you might recognize that image on the right there. That is from the Odyssey, one of the oldest stories in history, and yet thousands of years later, over 100 million people are going to go buy a ticket this summer to watch a story that has been being told for 5,000 years. And I think that one of the things, as we look forward, I'm asked a lot, how do you think AI is going to impact your industry? One of the things as I look forward, AI is going to make it easier than ever to have flashy visuals. Flashy visuals already with some of the AI models that are out there. If you want just a flashy, snazzy-looking commercial, you can go out and generate something that looks like it was shot on a $100,000 camera. I think what's going to continue, though, is the storytelling. Visual storytelling is such a key piece that AI can never capture. And so as we look forward, we know that storytelling is our key secret sauce that we need to build off of. And it's what we want to continue to use as we work with our clients. And so just to give you a couple examples, Hook and Arrow, has anybody ever tried Hook and Arrow before? Hook and Arrow is a hot sauce brand based in Branford, Connecticut, so just up the road. It's 2 brothers who had a love for hot sauce, had a love for flavorful hot sauces. And when we met with them, they said, listen, we have this really great hot sauce, but we're trying to break into an incredibly crowded industry, and everybody has their stats, their Scoville ratings, or has their flashy wrapper, but ours is about story. And so we made a commercial for them that really tells the story of these 2 brothers who created this hot sauce brand and say, this is different. This is not just burn your mouth on fire. This is really flavorful hot sauce. They're using natural ingredients, and you can put them on all sorts of different things. And that was to break through as a new brand for them. They couldn't just try and repeat what everybody else had been doing because that had been done. You needed to be unique through their storytelling. On the flip side, so Hook and Arrow has been around for maybe 3 years, and I should mention actually Hook and Arrow last season was featured on Hot Ones, which if you are a hot sauce fan, that's like a major accomplishment for them. That's one of the pinnacles of hot sauces. But on the flip side, Trinity College is a client of ours, been around for 200 years. So you might say, okay, Trinity College, like, they don't need help with storytelling. They've been telling their story for 200 years. But one of the things we found is they realized they'd really been relying on their reputation. So they had this really strong reputation, and their alumni would tell other people about the school. But as they were moving forward, they didn't have control over the story that was being told about them. And as they wanted to push forward into a new age, an age where they were doing more STEM stuff, they needed to be part of telling that story. And so they brought us on, and we told the story of what Trinity College is now and where it's going. Because sometimes, even if you have a strong story, all of us want to continue growing, are thinking about the ways that we're going to continue to innovate. And storytelling is such a key piece of that. And then finally, this is actually top secret. Nobody take pictures of this. This ad is going to come out on Monday. This is the brand new Connecticut 250 commercial that we did for Connecticut 250 and Connecticut Tourism. And it highlights all the really fantastic offerings that are going to happen across this state as part of the America 250 celebrations. And the problem is I think as a Connecticut resident myself, I can say, we know about a lot of the really great things that are happening, but sometimes when you're sitting on your couch on a weekend, you're like, do I really want to go down and drive down to Mystic Seaport? And so we saw storytelling as a way to inspire that action, right? You don't just need to know that Mystic Seaport is doing offerings for part of Connecticut 250. You want to be inspired by the family fun that's going to be offered there, or the cool historical opportunities you're going to have that weekend. And so, again, within a 30-second commercial, you're limited, but storytelling and telling the story of the fun that families can have, that Connecticut residents can have by participating, we hope is going to inspire people to actually take action, because information is easy to distribute, but actually inspiring stories is a lot harder. So some final takeaways for you. First, and actually I can't see my screen yet. Thank you. So first, utilizing the resources. As I said, the SBDC, I think, I would not be on this stage if I hadn't taken the time to send that email and say, hey, I want to use the business counseling resources. And I think what surprised me is at each stage, as my business has grown, they've been able to adapt to our needs. So we're now looking at building out a studio space, and they're still able to give me advice. I think back to like the first advice they gave me, which was figure out how to make a budget, and that's a huge leap. But I'm very appreciative of the way that they've been able to help me grow and continue to work with me. And in so many ways, having that advisor that has stayed with me now for 4 years means that I trust her advice a lot more, because I know that she knows the business so well. Second one, so much help. Thank you. Okay, yeah. So the risk, as I've mentioned, having that risk, or knowing that sometimes you need to take risk, and not taking bad risk, but knowing, hey, this is the right time to take on that debt, or this is the right time to hire that new person so that I have more bandwidth. I think that's something that I continue to grapple with, and I'm sure the small businesses in this room continue to grapple with, of when is the time to hire the right person. I found that, going back to point one, it's really helpful to have those advisors that I can sit down and talk to. And oftentimes in my conversations with Michelle, I either talk myself in or out of something. I say, Michelle, I think I need to hire somebody. And after a 15-minute conversation, you go, you know what? I talked myself out of it. I know I'm not ready to hire somebody yet. Or actually, you're right, I do need to hire somebody. So having that bouncing board, I think, has been really huge. And then the last one, the power of storytelling. I think where we're going right now as a country is storytelling is going to be such a key piece of where advertising, where marketing, and just relationships with your clients is. I think that when you think about how, whatever you do, whether you're service or retail, think about your relationships and when do your clients talk about you. It's the stories they tell. They'll say, hey, I went in and had a great experience, or I went in and had a bad experience, or did you know the backstory of this local small business? I can't tell you the number of times that I've checked out a restaurant or a small business because a friend of mine doesn't just say, oh yeah, it was a 4 out of 5 stars on Yelp, but they say, let me tell you the story that went along with my experience. And so I think storytelling and capturing those stories and bringing them to your audience is where we're headed. So thank you all so much for having me. I appreciate it.